Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. Secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shattered steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight, I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you, good night, and God bless America.
President George W. Bush, in his second address to the nation, and certainly the most grave speech that he has made in his very young presidency, as he talked tonight about the terrorists attempting to shatter steel in buildings but not being successful in shattering the steel of resolve in this country, saying,
WCBS News Time, 8:48. It's traffic and weather together. Tom Kaminsky, Chopper 880.
All right, Pat, we are just currently getting a look at the World Trade Center. We have something that has happened here at the World Trade Center.
And within half an hour, became America's second Pearl Harbor.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended.
By now, you've seen the pictures. But it's been a long, agonizing, and confusing 12 hours.
Oh, it was chaos. It's something out of a movie.
So briefly, here's what we know about exactly what happened. 8:48 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11, hijacked en route from Boston to Los Angeles, slams into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, 2/3 of the way up the 110-story building.
We had seen a fireball, and I can tell you it appears as though something has gone into the World Trade Center.
20 minutes later, at 9:08 a.m., a United Airlines flight, number 175, also from Boston to Los Angeles, tips its wings and crashes into the South Tower.
Oh, my God! Oh, my God!
An incredible fireball, so remarkable, it didn't even seem real.
Looked like a plane rammed into the second building.
35 minutes after that, 9:43 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77, scheduled to fly to Los Angeles from Dulles Airport outside Washington, dives into the Pentagon, destroying one of the building's 5 sides.
I happened to heard a plane come through. It sounded like it was running normal.
10:10 a.m., the 4th hijacked plane, United 93 from Newark to San Francisco, crashes in a remote area 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh.
It just come down like it was going to land, but instead of landing, it just went nose straight into the ground.
In a little more than an hour, 4 horrific plane crashes, hundreds believed dead. But far worse was yet to come. At 10:05 a.m., the South Tower of the World Trade Center, possibly weakened beyond hope by the plane's impact, collapses. People can be seen jumping from the high floors.
The building came just rumbling down. It was like a war zone.
10:28 a.m., and the North Tower, choked with smoke and flames from its upper floors, disintegrates. Smoke and ash from the destruction combined to make parts of New York City look like ancient Pompeii after the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Rescue firemen were coated with thick white dust.
This is terrible. We lost tons of guys. We lost tons of guys.
Cars were under blankets of ash. Rescuers were just happy to be alive. As for the death toll, even tonight there were no hard numbers. But New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani feared it might extend into the thousands. Half a world away, there was a far different reaction. Gunmen appearing to applaud today's terrorism. But Palestine Liberation Organization leader Yasser Arafat did not join in.
We are completely shocked. Completely shocked.
In Afghanistan, a spokesman for the ruling Taliban, who provides sanctuary for terrorist leader Osama bin Laden, said he could not have been behind the attacks.
Everybody out! Everybody out!
Back home, it was as if war had been declared.
Ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families.
President Bush spoke to the nation, first briefly in Florida, and later from a military base in Louisiana.
The resolve of our great nation is being tested. But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
Then, heading to another military base outside Omaha.
The airport's being evacuated. They need to go home.
All international flights into the U.S. were diverted to Canada. The FAA stopped every single commercial airplane flight for the first time ever. And terrorism experts made it a point to remind everyone that tomorrow had been set as a sentencing date for an associate of Osama bin Laden for his role in the 1988 bombing of the American embassy in Tanzania. That sentencing had been set for a federal courthouse near the World Trade Center. As the day ended in New York City, another skyscraper in the World Trade Center complex crumbled. Building number 7, 47 stories high. And tonight, while smoke from the collapse of the Twin Towers still lingered over New York City, Most who saw and survived this day still had trouble believing what they saw. The phrase you heard over and over again was, "It seemed just like a movie."
Russ Mitchell. In Washington, the nerve center of the U.S. military sustained its own swift attack. David Martin, our national security correspondent, has details about what happened at the Pentagon and how the U.S. military might retaliate when retaliation is deemed appropriate. David?
Dan, 12 hours after the attack, fires are still burning, although Pentagon officials say the flames are under control and the Pentagon will be open for business tomorrow. We now have new close-up pictures of the damage done by that plane, and Defense Secretary Rumsfeld had a grim warning that casualties will be high.
Some people have been lifted out and taken away in ambulances, and the numbers will be calculated, and it will not be a few.
The first attack ever on the Pentagon occurred at 9:38 a.m. Eastern Time.
Clip this pole over here, hit another pole and slammed right into the building. Huge explosion, and then utter pandemonium, as you might imagine. I mean, everybody was screaming, "Oh my God."
A hijacked American Airlines jet, which had just taken off from Dulles Airport, flew right up the main highway leading north into Washington and straight into the citadel of American military power.
There was no doubt about it. It was American Airlines slammed right into the building, and there was no doubt about it. Whoever was piloting that plane was aiming for the Pentagon.
Fearful that, like the World Trade Center, a second airliner was on its way, most of the building's 23,000 workers fled.
Plane's coming in. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. Come on. We're not playing around here. Let's go.
F-16 fighters circled overhead looking for a second attack, but the damage had already been done. The plane had drilled a hole about a third of the way through the world's largest office building. The wounded were rushed to nearby hospitals as the fire spread and an entire section of the building collapsed, trapping many, many more inside.
Arlington search and rescue personnel are just now, and it's about almost 2 o'clock, just now gaining access to portions of the building where the plane hit because the fires were too intense.
One ray of hope. The Pentagon is undergoing a major renovation, and some of the offices in the path of the plane were vacant.
We're trying to find out who made it out okay and account for the people that may not have made it out.
When the plane hit, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld moved from his office on the other side of the building into the National Military Command Center in the basement. With smoke hanging in the air, he ordered aircraft carriers, amphibious ships, cruisers, and destroyers to New York and Washington, where they can serve as floating hospitals, help with the cleanup, and provide air defense against the possibility of more attacks. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs made a clear threat of military retaliation.
I have no intentions of discussing today what comes next, but make no mistake about it, your armed forces are ready.
Right now, suspicion focuses on Osama bin Laden, but first things first. The FBI is combing the wreckage for evidence, and all U.S. military bases and embassies are at the highest state of alert. Dan?
David Martin reporting again live from the Pentagon. President Bush today called it, quote, a national tragedy, and the president vowed to, quote, hunt down and punish those responsible for the attacks. And there are already indications of who, or at least some of the who may have been behind them. More on that, we turn to Jim Stewart in Washington. Jim?
Dan, it didn't take long, and it's unclear whether it will lead to anything, but federal investigators are on the move tonight, serving search warrants and questioning potential accomplices to these attacks. Sources say the first concrete tips were picked up from a study of the flight manifest aboard the doomed aircraft. At least one search, we're being told, is in the Miami area. Meanwhile, intelligence officials say they have now picked up what one official calls significant indicators that the suicide planes were hijacked by members of al-Qaeda, the terrorist group that reports to Osama bin Laden. Sources describe the intelligence as communications